Would you face the opposition, even if the powers that be were plotting to kill you? Meet a man that stood toe-to-toe against apartheid and now fights anti-Semitism worldwide.
Meet Mitch and our special guest next on The Crossover. We'll be right back.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now, God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover. Here is your host, Mitch Jerome.
Today's special guest, Reverend Malcolm Heading, is the Executive Director of International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem. First Malcolm proved himself planting churches in Africa for 25 years and combating the evil forces of apartheid. Malcolm, thank you for coming to our show, The Crossover, and giving us some more time today.
Good to be here with you, Mitch.
This show is going to be addressed, as it said in the intro, on apartheid.
Mm-hmm.
And on the website, ICEJ, I remember there was a shot of a lake, a body of water, a sign near it that said, blacks not allowed to swim in this water.
Mm-hmm.
And that was somewhere in Africa. And I'm thinking in America, for us to relate to that, I mean, there was a time in the Deep South where blacks had to sit on the back of the bus, couldn't go to restaurants. Apartheid is a lot deeper than just that cause and effect. But define for our viewers, what is apartheid?
Well, apartheid was the systematic removal of people's human rights and dignity. And they were dehumanized. They were not only herded into special reserves, or what they called in South Africa Bantustans. Bantu means a black man. So you have a Bantustan, like Afghanistan, you know. Yeah. And they were forced to live there. They were also subject to laws which were what they called influx control. People couldn't move freely. They couldn't move in their own country. They couldn't own property. They couldn't own land. They couldn't really start businesses, and then there was also job reservation. They couldn't rise higher in the job market than a laborer. So a lot of the economy was built on the back of black labor who were disinvested of any type of rights or dignity, or even the rights within the job place.
Okay. So it had social, economic.
They were just totally disinvested.
Emotional impact.
Yeah. And when they were completed, when they were done with, they were just discarded as irrelevant. And so the system effectively dehumanized 40 million people.
So when you have some
in a country of 45 million.
So tell us personally, you're in Africa, you're there for how many years?
Well, I was born there.
Okay.
And
25 years
I grew up there.
Building churches and countering and apartheid.
What happened was I had a wonderful father who spoke every African language on the subcontinent and loved the black people. And he taught my brother and I, first of all, as a father, that this type of thing is out of the question. And he defended the black people in many circumstances. And as a consequence, they crowned him an African king. Then, of course, when I found Jesus and was saved, my conscience was heightened from a biblical point of view in terms of justice and righteousness. So I decided to use the platform that God had given me as a prophetic voice against the system. And I was not politicized. I wasn't going to start supporting a political party or anything like that. I took on the system theologically, and I began to discredit it and to destroy it, and to tell my congregations, and I traveled around the country holding seminars, that this was a devilish system.
So you were allowed to speak against it as long as it was from a church view?
Well, you can say allowed. They quickly got on to me. And
was not your life threatened?
Yes, it was. I eventually,
tell us a story there?
I had a plant put into the church by what was called the Bureau of State Security, BOSS. And he masqueraded as a freelance journalist. And then one night he got wonderfully saved. And the next week he came to see me and he said, look, I have to repent and ask you forgiveness. and this is who I am. And he basically told me that I had to make a plan to get out of the country as fast as possible. He also brought a file like that to show me.
That he had on you.
And he had sent to the government and whatever, and that they were going to detain me without trial.
Okay. Did you leave the country at that point?
So we left the country, went to Israel.
Okay, and that was around
1986.
Okay. So speak to us now. Israel
Yeah.
is
Now
being
the problem
labeled
is
apartheid.
Israel has been labeled the second apartheid state of the world. The idea behind that is if you can make that accusation stick, then you can go to the next step. The first is to discredit Israel by the slur. If you can get that right, then you can delegitimize Israel. You can say, well, this state shouldn't be allowed to exist, because if the original apartheid state had to be dismantled by the international community, then that also applies to Israel. So you delegitimize, you discredit, you delegitimize the state, and finally you dismantle the state. So this apartheid attack against Israel, by the way, is gathering momentum worldwide. I mean, even Jimmy Carter has climbed on the bandwagon. Bishop Tutu, who's an icon in South Africa, has climbed on the bandwagon. Some British MPs recently, in a public meeting together with Jane Jagger. You know, Jane Jagger is the daughter of the famous Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger,
Okay.
called for the British government to repeal the Balfour Declaration on the grounds that Israel is an apartheid state. And so there's a growing worldwide movement. And on the campuses of the USA and Canada, they're now holding Israel Apartheid Weeks to discredit Israel in the eyes of students on these campuses. And in this last year, they reported the most successful apartheid weeks in recent years. So there's this gathering momentum to discredit Israel, delegitimize Israel, and then dismantle Israel.
So it's a well thought out plot. It is definitely not by accident. But
now Israel is not an apartheid state, not in any shape or form. Israel is a democracy. Israel gives human rights and dignity to all its citizens, including Arabs and Druze.
Let me ask you this question in regards to that, Malcolm. Is an Arab in Israel able to hold a job?
Yeah.
Is an Arab in Israel able to vote?
Absolutely.
Is an Arab in Israel able to have free speech?
Absolutely.
Is an Arab in Israel able to pray in whatever manner, shape, or form they want to pray?
Absolutely.
What more rights do they need?
No, that's it. They have the same human rights, and they even are subject to the social welfare system. They get free medical treatment, everything.
So then this
the conflict with the Palestinians, it's a bunch of hot air. It's the use of a highly emotive word.
Define this emotive. You talk this on your website. Why the push to label Israel apartheid?
Because it's such a powerful word. It's like the word Holocaust. It's fashionable now when Israel does something that the world doesn't like to say, "Oh, you're committing a Holocaust." It's almost to say, "Got you." You know.
Got you.
Yeah, you're worse than the rest of us.
So when you say emotive, we're saying that's not a real compliment on mankind, saying that we're moved, and it's probably the facts, moved more by emotion than by logic and fact. If we have logic and fact, this won't even take hold.
That's right. But because emotions move your actions. So if you can penetrate the mind with a powerful notion like apartheid, then it stirs up emotions which can penetrate your actions. So you see people coming out on the streets of Europe all over protesting against Israel, and the slogan's always the same. You know, Israel apartheid state. You know, remove the apartheid state Israel.
So how does the average person watches the news, they get a 1 minute sound bite on Israel.
Yeah.
And that's what's flashed on the screen. Yeah. They're not doing any homework or research. That's the impression.
They don't know the background to this conflict. They don't know the historical facts around this conflict. And they are just impacted with it, and so they are brainwashed.
So what hence ICEJ.
Hence ICEJ, We have a media department that 24/7 combats all these things. We have a radio station called Front Page Jerusalem.
Well, when we come back from the break, I want to ask you a fact about Jimmy Carter and how you responded to that, and as a lesson for what the Christian should do when things like this arise. So stay with us. Got Malcolm Heading from International Christian Embassy Jerusalem with us. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment.
More of The Crossover when we return. The Crossover presents The Promised Land.
The Israeli propaganda tries to project the Palestinians as being terrorists, people who don't appreciate life, they just want to kill Israel. Israel is being threatened. Reality is the opposite.
Sorry, my Palestinian friend, but that is a lie. The fact is, Israel only fears your Palestinian people who love death more than life. Like the 140 homicide bombers who took the lives of 540 Israelis over the past years.
بصمت دامع بحنين الأم الدافئ ودعته واحتضنته والدته طويلا وطبعت على وجنتي الجناح العسكري لحركة حماس والمنفذ لعملية اقتحام مستوطنة عتسمون اليهودية في وطن الشهادة محمد الذي تبدو على ملامحه البراءة والجرأة تمكن من قص
Israel has been occupying Palestine for over 60 years. Israel has made over 8 million Palestinians dispersed around the world as refugees.
Prior to the State of Israel, there were Arab Palestinians and Jewish Palestinians on the same land. The day after Israel became a sovereign nation, the surrounding Arab nations ordered the Arab Palestinians to leave Israel so the surrounding Arab nations could attack Israel and push her into the sea, and then split the spoils of the land. So Israel is declared a nation, and immediately Israel is embattled in her war of independence. Obviously, Israel miraculously won that war of independence, to the dismay of the Arab neighbors. But guess what became of the Arab Palestinian people that did not leave Israel when beckoned by the surrounding Arab leaders? They became Israeli citizens, able to work, able to vote, able to own land and homes, etc. What became of the Arab Palestinians that left the land to attack Israel? They are today's Palestinians, refugees, because her own people, her own Arab nations, won't absorb them back into the land and give them rights. Why? Because they're being used as pawns, as we see today in Gaza.
Israelis are not doing a crime. Our soldiers are fighting so that every child and every Jew can have a state and a country that has been ours for 60 years. They haven't accepted that, and that's where the problem is. The minute they accept that Israel is here to stay and for 60 years has been a country for Jews, for Muslims, for Christians, open society.
Once again, here is Mitch Giroux.
Welcome back to The Crossover, and our guest is Malcolm Heading, Executive Director of International Christian Embassy Jerusalem. And Malcolm, I was just thinking, if I'm a nobody running on the street, just screaming the word apartheid, my sphere of influence is pretty darn small and, just like a nut out there. But if you're Jimmy Carter and the whole world knows who you are and you write a book called Peace, Not Apartheid, all of a sudden that sphere of influence is dramatically increased. Let's say like a tsunami going out over the waves. How did ICEJ respond when that book came out and all of a sudden Israel's being labeled by an ex-president of the U.S. apartheid?
Well, we began a media blitz about it. We began a video blitz on the internet, and we started to take it on personally because I think I have a greater moral authority than Jimmy Carter to speak on this issue. I grew up in South Africa. I am a white South African. I was part and perceived of being part of the privileged clan who benefited from apartheid, and yet I elected to stand out against it. And And so I knew the dangers. I took the dangers, and eventually we had to leave the country because of the threat against us and against our lives. So first of all, we have to find, as I said, a moral statement that can counter that type of purely academic analysis. And my being, by the purpose and hand of God, the executive director of the International Christian Embassy, with my history, gives me and the ministry a very, very good opportunity to say, essentially, people like Jimmy Carter and others, they really don't know what they're talking about. They didn't live through it. They know nothing about it. And to equate Israel with the apartheid system of South Africa is in fact an insult against the 40 million black people of the country who suffered under apartheid. It's just, there's no comparison. It's to belittle the apartheid state.
Yes.
It's like equating the Holocaust
To what happened to Gaza.
Yeah, you actually are minimizing the Holocaust.
Disgrace to the 6 million Jews.
It's a disgrace to the 6 million Jews.
Torture.
And these people who come out and make similar accusations are in fact insulting 40 million black people.
You know, on your site you were sharing that Pope Benedict came to the land. If I understood, he went to Yad Vashem.
Yeah.
And you didn't seem very satisfied in his choice of words or the lack of words that were spoken there. And I'm going to quote Isaiah here, because this is what you had on your site. It was quite profound in relationship to an article, I think, that you had written.
Yeah.
Isaiah 60:14, and we'll put this on the screen. The sons of those who afflict you shall come bowing to you, and all those who despised you shall fall prostrate at the robe of your feet. So, explain to us, where are you going with that? Pope's there. This is the quote that's in the article.
Whatever we say or think, the Pope represents Christianity for the Jewish world, or the greater segment of it. You have 1 billion Catholics in the world. The Pope makes an historical visit to Israel. He has a little bit of a troubling background, meaning that he's German and he served in the German military in the war, and before the war he deserted at the end.
So he was under the Nazi youth?
He was under the Nazi youth brigade, and he eventually drafted into the military, but before the end of the war he deserted. So he bears a peculiar responsibility from a national point of view. I don't care what people say, but I, as a South African, I shoulder the weight of responsibility concerning apartheid. Even if I took it on and lived out my conscience, I'm aware of who I am and what my roots are and my obligations, therefore, that relate to that. So he comes to Yad Vashem, and not only is there the problematic part of the Holocaust and the Nazis and his engagement with that, and we're not accusing him of anything, because, if you lived in Germany and you were drafted, you have little options.
Sure.
So we're not accusing him of anything, but we are saying it is problematic, it compounds his narrative, and furthermore, he stands as the supreme expression of the Catholic Church, which does have and is on record an awful history of anti-Semitism. It's not even debatable. The Inquisition, the Crusaders, we don't even have to go near all that. And if you read the stories, I mean, they are absolutely horrific.
History books have captured that.
Okay, so this is not even debatable. So he
came and stood in silence.
He stands in silence at a memorial place.
You expected more.
Where in just 1 minute, he could have made such a difference in Jewish-Christian relationships by just saying sorry. That we, the Catholic Church, are sorry for what we did as a church in the persecution and the murder of the Jews historically. I stand here today to ask your forgiveness, and I say sorry in the name of my church and in the name of Jesus. After all, he's a man of God.
And that's the Christian way right there.
And that's the Christian way. Now, why could he not do that?
Do you have an answer?
There may be many factors going down about why he didn't. Maybe it has to do with the infallibility of the papacy. The point is, it really disappointed Israelis.
You know, when persecution happens around the world to the Jew, usually it's what stirs them to move back to the land, called aliyah. And we know that's prophecy unfolding, is what that is. I'm just, for our viewers, our Jewish viewers that maybe are thinking of doing aliyah, and let's say times change down the road. Let's say there's hate crime bill passed in America, and that can change the pulpit and the church and the whole dynamic. And if persecution does come to, say, in America, to, say, the Jewish person, what I believe ICEJ has helped over 100,000 people make aliyah back to the land. But what's it like for a Jewish person returning to the land, just trying to make it? I mean, you go back there, jobs and
changing countries, regardless of your race or color, is a challenge for anybody, whether you're Jewish or not. So certainly coming from a Western country like the USA or United Kingdom, even South Africa, these are very first world countries with all the infrastructure, everything you need, Canada, Australia. So then coming to Israel. Now, Israel is by no means not first world. It is a remarkable first world country, but it is a culture shock. There is an Israeli Middle Eastern culture, and that is foreign to the average Western person. And so it's an engagement that takes a lot of courage. But there are all sorts of absorption groups and facilities and structures and financial benefits that enable the Jewish people to make that transition as smoothly as possible. And I would encourage the Jewish community to go home to Israel, because Israel is their amazing homeland, and truly they will find it first world in every way, but they will have to struggle with language and some of the infrastructure concerning culture. It's a very laid back, we'll do this tomorrow. It's not an easy culture to relate to. But if they are driven by the ideology of the return from exile to build a fabulous homeland, which today is a shining light in many respects to the world, then I would encourage the Jewish community to do that and to go home. The International Christian Embassy, you rightly point out, has assisted over 100,000 Jews to make Aliyah. In fact, far more. And just in the last month, we sponsored the 61st wide-bodied aircraft out of the former Soviet Union to Israel. We have sponsored 61 jumbo jets to bring the Jewish people home. So this is a miracle story. It's a wonderful story. And apart from all the challenges that Israel faces, Israel is a very safe and a very good place to bring up children.
The Promised Land.
And I also tried to make it very clear to the Christians all over the world that they are threatened to the same extent as the Jews and Israel are threatened. And I also say basically that Jews and Christians are waiting for the Messiah, who is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. And that Messiah is going to come to Jerusalem. And so Christians share this faith with the Jews.
The Hebraic roots of Christianity.
And we began looking at Jesus through Jewish spectacles and not our Texas spectacles or American spectacles or even Western culture spectacles. He's so much more glorious. He's so much more grand. It does not in any way detract from the fact that he's the Son of God, the risen Savior, but he's also a man.
Never forget.
The Nazis would rent entire trains from New York City. And here you have the train pulling in to Camp Siegfried.
Saluted.
It looks like Germany. You would not believe that this is America.
This is, if you didn't see the picture.
Yeah.
He wouldn't believe it.
And right below it is the Nazi headquarters. That picture you're looking at now is the headquarters of the Nazis in America.
And Christians are also understanding their Hebraic roots. And I think that's what the crossover is doing, is putting all of this together. And it's new and fresh to everyone.
Judaism 101.
Many times people ask, what is a Jew? Is it a race? Is it a people? Is it a culture?
Jewish-Christian relations. Bible, fact or fiction?
The crossover is really on the cutting edge of what's happening in the Christian world today. It looks at Jesus from a perspective that a lot of people have never looked at it before, but everybody wants to see it. I mean, you turn on all the Christian channels, and what are they talking about? They're talking about why Jesus did this and why Jesus did that, why did the apostles do this or that. And that's what's unique about the crossover. They're one of the few organizations that actually understands the background of why Jesus did what he did, because they're from a similar background, and that's what the world really wants at this particular time.
For more information on the crossover and the Crossover Project, contact Rosalie Jerome at 832-287-5057 or visit us on the web at www.thecrossovertv.org. Here again, Mitch and Rosalie Jerome.
It's wonderful to know that there are still people like Reverend Malcolm Hedding willing to risk their lives to stand up for truth no matter the cost. We are thankful for the burden that he and the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem carries in these days in fighting today's anti-Semitism in the guise of anti-Israel. And we pray that you too will consider standing up for truth no matter the risk. The Bible does not believe in apartheid, and neither does Israel.
That's all for this week. Come back again next week. And remember, these are prophetic times, and God is at work.
Remember that we offer our hearts and hands to reunite Jews and Christians through the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob on the crossover.
Shalom.
Join Mitch and Rosalie as they reach an ever-growing worldwide audience through the crossover. We invite you to become a crossover partner right now by calling the number on your screen. For your monthly gift of $30 or more, you will receive the Crossover Partnership Pack, which includes a DVD of today's program, a personal greeting and prayer message from Mitch and Rosalie, more information about the Crossover Project. As you continue to support the crossover each month, you will receive a new crossover DVD, plus a ministry report, and your name will be added to our healing room. Call now and join the growing family of crossover partners.